Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu jami'an. Today I want to talk about me searching up my lineage, my family tree, genealogy, and us as African Americans looking up our family tree, what type of benefits that we can receive from it, and what some type of healing. So after 2 or 3 days, which I haven't been making videos in the last 2 or 3 days because I've been looking up my family genealogy online through a website and other sources, and I come to see from my father's side of the family, which my father was deceased and died when I was very young in 1984. She died when I was very young. That I learned a lot about my father's side of the family, which is 4 generations from North Carolina. And when I looked up the genealogy on my father's side of the family, I have seen how many people I'm related to who has the same family last names, and from women who marry into the family, and from females with the same last name who marry into other people's family. One thing I learned from this, and that us African Americans, why we must study our lineage, family tree, genealogy, so we can see how many of the African Americans we are related to each other. And this is going to be part of the healing in the African American culture, which today is very much fixed in self-hate and inferiority complex. And if we start looking at our family tree and our lineage, then we will learn that many of us, we are related to each other. Then on my mother's side, I happened to get all my mother's, her death certificates for her family members, her mother, and I started looking at them and I collected them from her father, her mother, her grandfather, and her grandfather and her grandmother, and her great-great-grandfather, and her great-great-grandmother. And I see, wow, how deep connected even her family side is, where from 2 generations of her grandfathers married women from the same family. And then from my grandfather side of my father's side of the family, I have noticed they also married, their sons marrying to marry women from the same family. And then from that, I learned the other family members who married into each other's family. And those other family members who don't carry my last name, in some form or fashion, I'm also related to those peoples who carry that other last name. We are related. Imagine now if Black Americans start looking up their genealogy, their family tree, looking up their lineage, then we will see in America that many of us African Americans, we are related to each other. Some might notice that they're also related to whites, because whites being what? Landowners and slave masters and white folks who work for them. Some might find out that blacks are also related to native indigenous peoples. But that's not why I mention it today. Many of us, when we think about our family trees, from the self-hate that we have, the first thing that comes to some of our minds to see the white peoples we're related to, or the indigenous side that we're related to. We don't look in and see to look that many of us African Americans or African descents, that many of us are related to each other by blood and by marriage. And we need to start recognizing these things and studying these things, because it's part of the treatment for the development of the African American from the dysfunctions that we have from psychologically being traumatized through slavery and also through the self-hate that many of us don't want to recognize. We're African descendant, and many of us are related to each other. If we know some of these things and start studying them, then we'll think twice that the guy across the street from me might be related to me. Somebody who carries the same last name might be related to me. And if you know your other family members who don't carry your last name, but your mother's side's last name, that in some form or fashion, you're also related to this person. This is part of the healing that blacks need to know in America, so you can see as a fact that many of us are related to each other. And this will bring us together. And somebody will recognize, wow, I'm related to this person, or these people are related to me. Then you start recognizing, well, we are blood. We are kith and kin. And then someone else will recognize, well, this man's family might not be related to me, but we all also were owned by the same slave master. So you're also some form of my family, or close to the family. Then we start recognize that people from certain states marrying to other peoples from other states, black peoples. And then these family, like when I looked at my family tree, there are at least 4 generations in North Carolina, father's side, mother's side, 4 generations in Mississippi and Louisiana. 4 generations. Now imagine some of us who our families come from the South and moved up north. And then we marry into black peoples who originated from the North. And we marry into them. Or we marry people from there. Or we went up north and we marry other people from down south. And how we're intertwined with each other. And those family members that we have who migrated, those uncles and great aunts who migrated to other parts of the states and also had a number of children. We're also related to them. So the more we know about our family tree in America for blacks, the more we start learning that many of us of African Americans were related to each other. Furthermore, if you go deeper and see where some of our ancestors came from, if we came through the Atlantic slave trade and your family been 4 or 5 generations in one particular state, then you can notice, you can find out most likely what part of Africa they came from. Then we will start noticing that, hey, we also related not just to the African diaspora, the African continent, but we also are related to other Africans who didn't make it to North America, who made it to South America in the Caribbean islands. Then we'll start noticing we're also related to them. That is the African diaspora. The more black people know and see that they are related to each other, the more they will know, hey, we are actually one family. We are actually what? One family. So when you have things from systemic racism in America are in play, systemic racism is real. And systemic racism in America was geared and designed by the white power structure. But as I said, the African American, we are the fuel that go in the engine. The systemic racism system works as long as we're the fuel that goes in the engine of the train to give it steam toward the go. And what is that fuel that we have, that we give the systemic system? Is the self-hate and the misappropriate behaviors amongst African Americans that cause us to be more divided and do not bring us together, because we're not practicing ethno-arrogation. We're not practicing social economics with blacks. We're not intermarrying with each other anymore. We're not marrying each other anymore. Or we're not marrying together. And we have the self-hatred. And we're competing. And we're fighting each other. We're keeping the system of systemic racism working because we're the gas, or we're the fuel that goes in the engine. And that fuel is the self-hate. And part of the healing of the self-hate and dealing with it and removing it is starting to recognize that many of us blacks in America, we are related to each other. We are what? Related to each other. That goes over the head of some peoples. Some people mentally are not there. Some African Americans mentally, they're not there. They haven't evolved into this level of understanding. Why? Because we are sick peoples. We are peoples who have been misplaced, beaten, traumatized. So some of our peoples won't get out of this, unfortunately. Some of our peoples will be victims of this, unfortunately. But many of us, if you want to start some of the solutions for blacks in America to have unity, some of the things we have to start looking at, how many of us are related to each other. Many of us are related to each other. But unfortunately, many blacks in America, they're not invested into their own peoples. And there's a reason why we are suffer the way we suffer within the United States, because we're not invested into each other. And as long as we're not invested into our causes and our peoples, we will be at the we'll be at the bottom of the barrel. We'll be at what? The bottom of the barrel. If I look at Latinos in America are very much together. Why? Language, culture, and related to each other. And what connects them? Language. Their language, culture, and many of them are what? They are connected to each other. Whites in America, same thing. Even though they had the Civil War, but when it comes to white people fighting non-white peoples, they what? Those two white people were enemies will come together to fight the non-white threat. They'll come together because they know in the end of the day, many of them are what? Related to each other. And at the end of the day, they don't want to be what? Overran or overturned by what? Their opponents, their enemies. So if blacks look something very simple, their lineage, their family tree, it will show them how many of them are what? Connected to each other. Some of us blacks, we can't get there, unfortunately. Some black Americans, we're not going to get there, unfortunately, because many of them, we are victims. Many of us, we're victims, and we succumb to our wombs. Many blacks, we succumb to our wombs. What wombs that we succumb to? The war on drugs, or drugs itself, drug use, and the effect of this. So many of us, we can't get out of it, or the conscious mind is locked up because the drug use, the marijuana, the cocaine, the crack, the alcohol. Some of us, we ain't going to never come out of it consciously. This is for those blacks who want change. If you want change, and you serious about the change, and you want your peoples to benefit, then you're going to reflect. If you're serious, you're going to reflect. And if you're really serious, then you're going to make the changes so you could come, so we as peoples could come out what we are in. Some blacks ask why black people in America were never able to build anything, to do anything. And one great black thinker, I heard him recently say, black people in America can't build because they're sick. And he's a psychologist. He says somebody's mentally ill, you can't expect him to behave like a normal person and build like a normal person. Black people, until they deal with their psychological issue, the trauma due to slavery in America and the self-hate, until you're able to deal with that, then you'll be able to build. Sick peoples or mentally disturbed people or mentally traumatized people can't build because they're traumatized. So once we clean up and deal with our issues psychologically, then we as the blacks could come together. The reason why we're not coming together now, because we're traumatized and don't know it. We're psychologically traumatized. Self-hate, systemic racism. We're psychologically traumatized and many of us don't know it. It's time for some of the healing. I'm not saying you learning your lineage is going to be the answer, but it's part of the process. So you can see that many of us black folks in America, we are related to each other. And I will end on that note.
Please like and share. If you really like this video, please click like and share. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And this is an example of a lineage. Well, here is my lineage, a family tree.